Okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit about autism now. And obviously, it's a disorder that's become much more diagnosed in the last decade, 2 decades. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what it is and exactly, how you get it. First of all, let me say I am not an expert in autism, but I do know the basics. Okay, so basically, autism is a disorder usually marked by language impairment, social interaction impairment, and uh, repetitive behaviors also tend to be a big issue. I don't know if you can hear that, but I think one of my children is about to take a bath. Never a dull moment. Okay. So it's a disorder that appears in childhood and is marked by deficient communication, social interaction, and understanding of other states of mind. Uh, there's several different terms used to describe the different types of autism, and they change every few years. I do know that the mildest form is called Asperger's. I think that was the guy's name that figured it out. It's kind of an unfortunate name, but uh, he or she, I don't know who it was, but basically these kids are usually very, very high functioning autistics, and they, by and large, you've probably gone to school with several because they usually are mainstreamed into just in the everyday classes. But they'll have some awkward, social interactions. They may not pick up on sarcasm very well. They won't understand sometimes some facial expressions, but for the most part, they're able to do just fine. Then you get the sort of autistic disorder, and that's sort of the other extreme end, and that's they're going to have a lot of issues with all kinds of stuff. Sometimes they have seizures, and they'll have all the stuff that Asperger's does, but more extreme. And and it can go a variety of depths, I guess you could say. Many times they're not able to function on their own. They have to be in special classes because you never know what's going to set some of them off. They have very specific things they have to do a certain way. And it's not something you grow out of. It's not an immaturity. It's a part of them. They just don't have the ability uh, uh, to handle change very well. So that's autism. Another thing I want to address is it's not. A lot of people think autism and then they hear autistic savant. Okay, savantism is a whole separate thing. You can be an autistic savant, but that's extremely rare. Just so you understand, what they're finding now is 1 in 68 kids is diagnosed with autism of some type. Okay, and again, we don't know if that's because we're better at detecting it, or if there is actually a rise in autism. It's not clear. We don't know because when I was a kid, nobody used the word autism. You didn't even know it existed. So, but when we talk about autistic savants, that's extremely rare, okay? And these are kids who will have all those issues that I mentioned, but they also seem to have some type of remarkable ability with their brain. So whatever's going on with their brain and that it causes the autism and things aren't functioning well, another side tends to open up for these savants, and they can do things like they can hear music. They can just hear these complex music pieces by Beethoven and Bach and Mozart, and they can just sit down and play them on a piano. Or I've seen some that can draw just in fantastically well just from memory. Like go out to a city, look over a city for a few minutes, just look at it, and then go back to their studio and draw the whole thing from memory, and it's like almost perfect. Just amazing skills like that. And if you've ever seen Rain Man, the movie, that's what it's about. It's an autistic savant, and like one night he gets a hold the Rain Man gets a hold of a phone book, and he memorizes half of it in an evening. Memorizes the entire phone book or half of it. So things like that. That's not normal. Okay. All right. So that's autism. And if you have any questions, please bring them up in class. I'd be glad to discuss them and see if we can find out some more information for you. All right, where are we at here? Now we're moving on. What happened? It's not what I want. There we go. Concrete operational. All right, during this stage, children gain the mental operations that enable them to think logically about. You're not on screen.
I don't get
Goof.
that. I don't care.
All right. All right. All right.
Sorry for the hold on.
No problem. All right. The gain. Okay, let me start over again. Stage during which children gain mental operations that enable them to think logically about concrete events. So, if they can see it, and then they can manipulate it in their mind. That's what's going on with concrete operational stage. Okay. So here's some explanations. Their mathematical skills improve, and we also have the idea of conservation developing here. The principles that properties such as mass, volume, and number remain the same despite changes in the forms of the objects. And basically, think of when you take a glass of water, and for instance, this water right here, and you pour this glass. You can see how big this cup is. Okay. Now, and let's say there's water up to here. Now, if you were to watch me and I were to pour it into like a petri dish, okay, that you would use in biology, one of those very thin but wide petri dishes, and you saw all the water drain out of the cup and into the petri dish. We, as people who have developed conservation, would understand it's the same amount of water that was in the cup is also in the petri dish. Before you develop conservation, kids will look at the two, and they almost inevitably pick. If they were to be asked, well, which one of these two dishes or glass in a dish has more water in it, they will always pick the taller of the two. Even though it's the exact same amount of water that's being held by both containers, they'll always pick the taller of the two. So like a glass that has a narrower base, so the water would rise up higher, they'll pick that one as having more water in it. So it's kind of interesting. Okay. All right. Now, once we get to formal operational stage, okay, this is the last one. Okay. And this is where you are, where I am, further down the line. I mean, I guess once you get to a certain point, you're just pretty much always there. And this is where we're trying to develop several parts of your mind so that you're ready for the real world when you get out there. It's a stage during which people begin to think logically about abstract concepts. They don't really exist. Like, again, like, complicated math or things like that. The ability to reason morally develops at this stage. You don't have very good conversations with, like my sons right now, with what are the ethics involved with the United States invading Afghanistan and Iraq. They'll just know so and so's gone, daddy's gone, or she left, she came back, and they're bad people there, the bad people. They're not going to get into any kind of what's our obligation once we win the war, what do we need to do, and this and that. They can't have that conversation. Okay. All right, and then some other things here that will be helpful for you. If this, then that examples. These are formal operational thinking, and I'll show you some of these. Let's see. All right. If John is in school, then Mary is in school. John is in school. What can we say about Mary? So most of you would say Mary's in school. Okay. And that's a formal operational thought there. Now, if we said Mary's in school, if the second sentence said Mary's in school, what can we say about John? I'm betting a lot of you would say John's in school. Not necessarily. You can't go backwards with that. We just know that it works one way as far as the rule that's been given to us. You can't go backwards with it. So Anyway, these are things you're trying to develop in your formal operational stages. If you want to go to law school, prepare to have an entire test, 2.5, 3 hours of these type of things. Much more complicated, but these type of questions, and they're nerve-wracking, and it's timed, and you're not supposed to finish it. So anyway, life lesson. Most 7-year-olds can answer this. Piaget's critics say his stages started at earlier ages than he originally thought. Some criticisms of his theory there. So, good. I'm going to move on to the next. So what does this all mean? Implies that children are not passive receptacles waiting to be filled with a teacher's knowledge. There's thinking going on, in other words. They can learn on their own. Teachers would do better to build on what children already know, engaging them in concrete demonstrations and stimulating them to think for themselves, which is what I pretty much have always tried to do. Not always the best place to do it is the classroom, but wondering if you agree. I'm assuming most of you do. I hope this clears up the Piaget sensory. First thing you have sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and then formal operational stages. I hope this makes it clear. I'll probably beat it to death. Please ask questions, and the next video will cover social development. Bye.